Quick 3 questions I want to ask anyone who's willing to answer in the comments. No cheating. Try to answer each question before you hear the one that follows, for science. Number 1, what would you say is the most realistic game you've ever played? Number 2, what is the game you'd say is the most fun game you've ever played? And number 3, did those 2 questions have the same answer? They definitely didn't for me. I have a feeling most of you can relate, and I have some thoughts as to why. Let's talk about it. My answer to my first question would have to be a racing sim like Gran Turismo or Forza Motorsport. The answer to my second question would easily have to be Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Splatoon. These are games that use their video game status to create an enjoyable experience, whereas the former examples, in my opinion, try to take the video gamey quirks out of their respective genres to present their realistic take on what they are trying to emulate, often stripping them of elements that otherwise would make them enjoyable in a game. When I refer to realism in games, I'm not necessarily talking about graphics. While it's true, games that do fall under the realism distinction tend to focus more on graphics than creative art direction, and that's not my favorite thing in the world. It's honestly a different topic. What I'm talking about here is specific to gameplay mechanics. Essentially, any gameplay elements that are put in place to act as stand-ins for some aspect of a real-world activity. Things like ever-present stamina bars, hunger gauges, inventory encumbrance, the list goes on. In my opinion, games that tend to tout their realism make a few concessions in the interest of being realistic. Most games tend to bend some rules in this area because while friction is a part of the formula for any game, some friction actually gets in the way of an enjoyable experience. Example, is it realistic that Mario, after hours upon hours of crazy athletic feats, doesn't get tired, never needs to drink water, eat food, or even in most cases breathe oxygen? No. Is it a better game for ignoring these facts? Absolutely, because if it didn't, it would impact the fluidity of the experience without adding anything to what makes it fun. So let's narrow down the problem a bit more. The problem presents itself when the friction doesn't allow for gameplay that is cyclical in some way. While others revel in their ability to make a game as feature-rich, bloated as possible, the games that come to mind as the ones that are the most realistic in all metrics tend to fittingly be simulators like Madden or Gran Turismo, and in my opinion, these two games are infinitely less fun to play than more arcadey alternatives like NFL Street or Burnout, and that's because the concessions made are inverted. They take out unrealistic elements that tend to make games, well, games, in an attempt to immerse the player in the real-world simulation they're trying to create. With that in mind, does this mean games that take realism into account can't be fun? Of course not. On one end, fun is subjective. I'm sure there's at least 14 people in the world that genuinely believe watching paint dry is a blast. And on another, realism in games is and should always be a spectrum. Even the video games that claim to be amongst the most realistic are still just that. Video games at the end of the day, with budgets and timelines that wouldn't allow for every aspect of a real-world analog to be present in their game's design. And even better than that, some games realize that realism in moderation can make a game even more fun than it would have been without it. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild's use of a stamina system isn't solely a vapid grasp at immersion. It's first and foremost a means to deepening the gameplay experience that builds on the game they were trying to make in meaningful ways. On a base level, it turns traversal into a movement-based puzzle, something that's been core to Zelda games for much of the franchise's history. Furthermore, the stamina system plays into the way the game deals with difficulty, risk, and reward. At the beginning of the game, your lack of stamina makes most of the world a lot scarier to engage with because your escape options are limited. Your ability to explore the world is limited by your resourcefulness, and that all becomes less true as you level up your stamina, something that's a reward for progressing in the game. All of this gels well with the type of game The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is on a gameplay level, and it's consistent with the rules of its world. Now look to games like NBA 2K, where with every entry they add more and more elements to the game to simulate the real-world life of a basketball player that adds nothing to the core gameplay experience that comes with playing basketball. More than anything, these additions are made in the name of immersion to the theme, not the gameplay. Does it contribute to the gameplay in some way? Sure, some of it at least. The copious amounts of overt advertising don't help you get the ball in the hoop any easier. The after-game interviews and J. Cole mentoring your music career subplot don't exactly help you get more consistent rebounds, but the stat-boosting minigames do make your character better suited to perform well in the game, and sometimes make you better at the individual task that you're trying to improve the stat for. But not as much as giving Take-Two money will. The problem with this approach to realism is that more often than not, it's at the expense of playing the actual game. I'm sure some people buy 2K to feel like they're living the life of a basketball star, but at the end of the day, the point of the game has always been to simulate the game of basketball. Making that more realistic, assuming the mechanics they come up with don't actively make the experience less fluid and fun, of course, could make the game much more robust and rewarding to play and master. All of this said, I'm generally conflicted on the concept of realism in gameplay mechanics because, like I said, on one end, no game that does it well is consistently realistic. In fact, the best are typically very intentionally unrealistic, but they pick and choose which parts of their gameplay experience can use complexity, and then they find ways to incorporate it while also ensuring the flow of the game is maintained, if not enriched. This is an approach I like quite a bit. On another, there are many games that will go for realism even at the expense of fun. Take, I don't know, Death Stranding, a game that's director outright said the game lacked fun, which for a video game, in my opinion, is troubling to say the least. Obviously, games nowadays at times tackle difficult themes. Some may say that's reason enough to intentionally forego fun so as not to deflate the gravitas of a given situation. On some level, I agree with this line of thinking, but ultimately disagree with the conclusion. If a theme is too serious to be made fun for fear of taking it in vain, making a video game involving those themes in the first place should be called into question. If Call of Duty, a war simulator, can both exist and make game design decisions in the interest of fun, that should mean pretty much any game idea that's socially acceptable to make can be the same. Game devs aren't making players eat their vegetables by creating a game that isn't fun in the interest of paying respect to serious material. To me, it feels more like an admission that their game would be better suited as a movie. Narrative experiences like Detroit Become Human aren't better stories for skimping on gameplay elements. They're not even necessarily more realistic for it. They just aren't creative enough to come up with gameplay solutions that fit their world and can be fun for players to experience. I'll die on the hill that every game first and foremost should be fun. If a developer wants to make a movie, just make a movie. I don't think making it PlayStation exclusive, charging upwards of $60 and dangling the ability to press X occasionally makes these frail attempts at narrative experience any more of a game, and if it does, it dilutes what could have been passable film into a mediocre and obtuse interactive experience. I know I said at the top of the video that I wouldn't make it about graphics, but graphics do often play a part in gameplay from the way characters move, the abilities they have, and sometimes even the amount of actual gameplay to be experienced by the player in the first place. I don't necessarily want to single any games that are negatively affected by this out, mostly because unlike NBA 2K, capital G gamers have a way more positive outlook on many of them and will often blindly defend these tactics, and I'm not here for the flame war. Instead, I want to talk about the unrealistic games that double down on their fantastical settings in the name of quality of life improvements in their gameplay. Games that embrace smear, squash, and stretch in their animation to give the player access to movement that feels visceral and more fluid. Again, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild being another shining example of the perfect marriage of realism and cartoony nonsense in the interest of fun with the temperature system. There's clothing with protection against extreme temperature. There are potions with similar protection, food, fire can keep you warm, ice can keep you cool, and so on. None of this would work as well if the graphics were focused on realism, because something that remains true in both real and unreal games is they want to be believable in the context of the world they created. Something I think every game needs to nail, because consistency is key no matter how grounded a game claims to be. I think at the end of it all, that's my personal primary issue with the concept of realistic games. Not only are no games actually realistic, the ones that try to be are usually less fun. fun and or interesting as a result of their rigid attempt to emulate real life. I'll give some of the games in the realism camp points that make otherwise menial tasks enjoyable, mostly as a result of removing the less enjoyable aspects of them. Farming in real life sucks, at least in the short term. Farming in a video game removes all of the hard work and just leaves the satisfying end result of seeing your crops grow, your animals start to turn a profit after maturing, your produce earning enough to expand your farm, and so on. Or games like Power Wash Simulator, which in a lot of ways bends reality in the name of fun, but what's accurate just makes the game more satisfying without getting in its own way. Realistic games are almost entirely a lie. The ones that aren't are generally less fun than games that embrace being games. Not being fun shouldn't be a badge of honor for literally any video game, no matter the subject matter. Sometimes the stars align and games that are on some level realistic end up being fun, but the overall majority of games are one or the other, fake and fun or real and boring. I'm interested in hearing all of your thoughts and, if possible, examples to the contrary in the comments. In fact, commenting on this video would be in your best interest if you have a Nintendo Switch, because it's a requirement to be entered in our video premiere eShop card giveaway, as is subscribing to the channel and being here when our next video premiere goes live. So ring the bell to know when that is. Also, follow us on socials, and if you want to support what we do here, check out our Patreon. Okay, goodbye.